Hey everyone, and welcome to the 25th episode of Key Gripe. I'm very excited that I actually made it to 25. I thought I would given this up a long time ago. But welcome to Key Gripe, the show where I do short, sweet reviews of new release movies, plus the one thing that annoyed me the most. Today, I'm going to be talking about Disney's latest release, Zootopia. I'm admittedly a huge fan of Disney, so obviously this is something, I'm just ready to jump right into. I absolutely loved this movie. But first, let me kind of give you a background of what it is. It'll be fairly quick because I want to talk about the importance of this movie. Basically, Zootopia is in a world where it's basically you have these kind of anthropomorphic type of animals, they're just straight up animals who, live like human beings would. They live in cities or towns, but basically the premise is that at some point the relationship between predator and prey actually converge to where actually they are living together. So you have predators and prey and non-predator animals living together in these societies. And in a small town, this bunny wants to grow up to be a police officer, basically, which to them is ridiculous because bunnies are not predatory. B, she's also really, really small. And C, she really where everyone thinks she belongs is doing carrot farming. But, she basically helps some kids out, when she's young and gets that rush of wanting to be a police officer, so she pursues it. And, she goes to the academy and succeeds, by using her, her weaknesses, or I shouldn't say weaknesses, but anything that, her limitations as her strengths, So instead of being able to scale a wall like somebody else, like a polar bear can, she can jump on the polar bear and jump over the wall. So, it's she uses those limitations to her advantage and becomes, a shining example of a police officer. And they bring her to basically the capital city, or the big city, Zootopia, to be a police officer in one of their divisions there. It's sort of like a PR thing to say, oh, look here, we have a rabbit who is a police officer. But obviously the serious police officers, they're not all that interested in having, a rabbit do it. Jennifer Goodwin does the voice of the rabbit Judy Hopps, and when she goes to meet her police chief, who's played by Idris Elba, she gets this kind of rude awakening that he doesn't want her there. He's not interested in this publicity stunt. He just wants her. He just wants the people, his police officers to do their job, because they're big, they're predatory, to do that. And at that time, there is a case of missing animals, basically, and he gives everybody a case except for her. She becomes a meter maid, and during her meter maiding, she comes across this fox. Now she has this kind of natural aversion to foxes. In fact, the only thing she carries with her is a bottle of fox repellent, basically. So, when she sees this fox, she obviously mistrusts him right away. But, she comes to find that there's a reason she mistrusts him, because he's actually kind of a swindler. But he's, he's not a predator. He's not after her. He's just kind of, that's his shtick, basically. And she comes to think that, that maybe he can actually help her in some way, kind of, solve some of these, missing, animal cases. And she ultimately kind of blackmails the chief in order to allow her to help in one of the cases. So she enlists the help of this fox to start tracking down this otter who basically went missing, and there's no evidence as to why this guy went missing. And this kind of takes her down this rabbit hole, as it were, of finding these clues until she ultimately they find the missing animals. They find all of the missing animals and find out that they've all gone savage, which basically means that they're losing that ability to be rational, reasonable animals, and now they're kind of reverting to their primal stages, which means predators are hunting prey, kind of that, savage mentality. And so when they find this out, they, bring up that there's corruption, in the government. They show that, there's something bigger going on here. And suddenly, predators become a target in their society, that, they're now an enemy, basically. But as she unfolds the story and starts to learn more about and actually discovers the truth behind why these animals are going savage. She discovers that actually it's not that they are turning savage. It's not something biological. It's something that's being done to them. And it's being done to them by, a non-predator who's trying to pretty much get rid of predators entirely. When she solves that, she becomes the hero, and there's a conflict with the fox, throughout that, he knows that, she has that spray and doesn't trust him. But ultimately he helps her, crack this case and, becomes a police officer at the end, and, everybody in Zootopia is happy again. It's a very cute movie. It has a somewhat complicated plot for, as a kid's movie. I'm not going to say it's an impossibly complicated plot, but it's definitely more involved than what you normally get with, kids movies, and Disney movies in particular. I thought that they did a really good job actually getting, something a little bit more mature while keeping it very, fun and fresh for kids to enjoy. So why do I love this movie so much? There's a reason that I was so blown away by this movie, and there are two reasons. One of them is silly, the other one is meaningful. The silly one is they have one of the best Breaking Bad references ever in a kids show. So there's just this absolutely awesome Breaking Bad reference that I know I was probably one of like 3 people in the theater, because most of the people in the theater were kids, but that I was laughing pretty hard at it. But the other reason is this movie has a deeper underlying message. It has something that is, Disney is notorious for this. They're notorious for taking stories that are much more mature, much darker, and lightening them up, but also adding something to them that is valuable for kids, for families, or for people to actually hear this. I recently watched The Good Dinosaur, which is a Pixar movie, and that one had a really good message to it as well. And then I look back on something like Inside Out. Inside Out has a really complicated message behind it, but it teaches this important message to children. Zootopia does something like that as well. Zootopia is a movie that's basically about the differences of people, and it's at the core of what this movie is about tolerance and understanding. It's not necessarily about 2 people are necessarily going to agree on everything, but there's this line of respect of seeing other people as equals, and not necessarily equals as I am as strong as that person, I am as rich as that person, I am as pretty as that person. Not that kind of equal, but basically have the same equal right to live. Because that's what the core of this movie is you have these, you have this person who, this character who's trying to basically turn everybody on the predators. The predators are a 10% of the population group. So you could say they are a minority group. And so when something happens that paints that minority group in a bad light, then everybody, the call is for people to turn against them. There's a scene that actually made me cry during the movie because it hit very, very pointedly, and they didn't dwell on it for long because again it's a kids movie, but it was a very pointed moment where they're on this, these animals are on this bus, and a predator is on the bus, and suddenly people just start yelling at them and attacking them. And it really hit me because it's one of those things I see a lot of people who, without getting too political here, but people who use the differences of other people against them when they have done nothing wrong. And, especially behind this movie is that there's a lot of, people out there who will try to paint an entire group negatively because of their skin color, because of their gender, because of their religion, things like that. And this movie is showing you that that is a bad thing. It is a bad thing to judge people based on those certain characteristics, or to judge an entire group. Yes, there are going to be bad apples, but at the core of this movie, there is still, the villain of this movie is somebody who's supposed to be one of the good guys, is somebody who's supposed to be one of the non-predator type. The predators are the ones who are painted as negative, as scary, as violent, savage creatures. But in the end, the true villain of the story is a non-predator. So it's one of those where, like when you're told a narrative entirely that, this group of people is bad, and you find out that actually it's the people who are telling you that they're bad that are, behind this, then it questions your faith in that system. And that's what this movie is intended to do. There's also that message of, there's that like larger sociological message, which is what drew me to this movie so much, is just how strong that is of, not judging people based on those differences. But then, taking it away from the political, there's also a, really good message there about, using your limitations to your advantage, or, not letting your limitations drive who you are or define who you are. There's a lot of people in this world who don't let their limitations define them. People who are, handicapped, people who are, basically who have, had, severe injuries or illnesses, people who are, in bad economic situations or educational situations, but people who don't let those things hurt them because they know what their goal in life is and they chase it. And that's what Judy Hopps is. Judy Hopps is that sort of like ideal for, the stick-to-itiveness of individuals, of, pursuing your dreams and, having goals in life and following them and not letting those limitations bring you down, which is such a, it's such a great message for kids, especially, today where, there's, so many things out there, and, there's a lot of pressures that it's like you have to be this way, or you have to act this way, or you have to do these sorts of things. But it's okay if you don't, if you define your own life, if you choose your own path. Everybody wants to do, everybody wants you to be a, to follow in their foot, parents want their children to follow in their footsteps, but if they choose not to, if their dream is somewhere else, they can do that. And that's really what this movie does. So you have this like really strong sociological message about, understanding others and tolerance and things like that. You also have this, strong message of, believing in yourself and, not letting your limitations define you. And you put those together and you have an extremely strong message for kids to really, take that into account, take that to heart, and start to, apply this to the world and say, that person is different, and someone might have told me once that person was bad, but I don't know them. They could be a good person. In fact, I should assume that they're a good person so that I don't add to this narrative that they have that everybody thinks that they are a bad person. Somebody with tattoos, And it's like, just because somebody has tattoos does not mean they're a bad person or that they do something bad. It just means that's how they define themselves. So, there's a lot of messages here for kids to learn. And I always am, amazed by movies that do this. And I hope that the message does get across. I hope that kids walk away from this, with that feeling. It's an entertaining movie too. And that's, like any Disney movie, there's a lot of entertainment, a lot of, cute stuff, a lot of jokes, things like that. And, you hope that the message is not buried in those jokes. This is one that's really hard for me to come up with a key gripe. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch. But the reason it's hard for me to come up with a key gripe because I know it's going to be something that's just nitpicky. It's, there's a couple of characters I wasn't too fond of. The voice acting in this movie is amazing. You have Jennifer Goodwin does a great job. Jason Bateman as the Fox. Idris Elba, Jenny Slate, J.K. Simmons, Octavia Spencer, just to name a few. Bonnie Hunt, she's done a bunch of, Disney and Pixar movies as well. So Alan Tudyk, another one I can't forget about him. He plays, as a nice little reference to Frozen, he plays Duke Weaselton. That is such a great reference to Frozen. But if I had to really pick a key gripe, it's actually probably the one scene that, it was in a preview, and people love this scene. I could not stand this scene, and it's probably because they played it too long. It's almost like a bad Family Guy joke where it's just like, okay, you've hit your mark, you've done the joke, now it's time to move on. And that's the scene in the DMV with the sloths. The sloths are adorable, and there's a great joke at the end of the movie that involves the sloths. Even in the DMV, it's a great scene. The problem is it drags way too long. And it's one of those that I feel like kind of actually, hurt the momentum of the story at that point. Because the story, you're building this mystery, this great, intense mystery that they're trying to, solve. And then all of a sudden there's this scene that just goes on for way too long of, a sloth joke that, could have very easily been cut down. So, but if that's my one gripe about this movie, that's pretty good given, it's, animation wise, it is absolutely gorgeous. It is phenomenal in so many ways. So between the animation, the voice acting, the story, and above all, the message that it sends, this is a hallmark of Disney movies. And it shows one really big thing for me about Disney is that they are willing to grow up a little bit. And that's not to criticize Disney for being, childish or stupid. But even with a movie like Frozen, Frozen is a great movie, but it's so safe. Whereas this one is a huge, huge risk for Disney because they're actually attempting something that is not really very Disney. It's something, Disney in kind of the traditional sense. Even Big Hero 6 was fairly safe. This one is not safe. This is a risk, and it paid off huge because this is a superb movie on every level. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. Great movie. Absolutely fantastic movie. And one I would recommend to everybody, especially for that sociological message. So if you have kids, take them to go see Zootopia because not only will they enjoy it, but they will learn something that's valuable and will carry on with them for their entire lives. So thanks a lot for watching this 25th episode of Key Gripe, and I will see you guys next time. Late.